Hello, welcome. My name is Mike Bankhead. I am your host. I am a bass player and songwriter from the Gem City, Dayton, Ohio. My guest today is a fellow Xenian. Yes, my hometown of Xenia. This gentleman shares that hometown. His name is Grieve, and he is also a podcaster. How about that? Arch's podcast is called Discover Dayton, and you'll learn in this conversation why he started it and basically what it's all about. Let's get to it. I just learned when you signed in that Arch is short for Archibald.
Yes, it is.
Does anyone actually call you Archibald? Is my first question.
A few people every once in a while, usually people who know other Archibalds, they will generally say, is that short for Archibald? And then they'll call me that. But most people just call me Arch. So
okay, Arch works. You introduced yourself to me as Arch, so that says to me that's probably what I should call you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hi there, Arch. Welcome to my podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
We are from the same hometown.
Yeah. I grew up in Xenia all my life, lived there for first 10 years we were married, and we moved to Dayton here maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But yeah, from Xenia.
What year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 2004.
All right, so you were a lot younger than me, which is probably why. Yeah, I was saying that you're a whole lot younger than me, and that's why our paths never crossed. I'm class of 96, so that makes you
Gotcha.
8 years younger than me. So
Yep.
you would have been like in fourth grade when I graduated.
Yeah, I think I knew some of your friends, though, maybe. I know Ben Lippincott. I used to be in a band with him.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew him and Danny Cancino or not.
I knew Ben because we graduated the same year. So
Nice. Yeah.
yeah. And the thing is, Xenia is a small enough town that if you try hard enough, you'll probably find people that you mutually know.
Right? Oh, yeah, for sure.
Even across generational differences.
Right.
Are you familiar with the New Old Fashioned?
I am, yeah. I've heard them. They're really good. I don't know a ton of their stuff, but
they're fellow Xenians.
Right, yeah. I did know that, yeah. They've been around for a little while now, haven't they?
Musically, yeah. I'm going to say maybe 10 years.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to have those guys on, and then we'll get to the bottom of that. But
Absolutely. Yeah, you should. But they're really good. I like them.
So let's talk about your podcast. I know it's probably not super podcast etiquette to talk about other podcasts on one's podcast, but you know, we're a big happy family here.
Absolutely.
Tell my very small listenership about your podcast.
Well, I just started it last month. It's called Discover Dayton, and it's just my billing for it, I guess, is it's all about the Gem City's past, present, and future. So trying to do some local history, do some, I just put out an episode today about, I interviewed the manager at Corner Kitchen. So I'm talking to like bars and restaurants and then local businesses, just trying to let people know that there's a lot of cool stuff to do in Dayton, basically. And it's got a really cool past. And then, also talking to some people about, what they're planning to do in the future. So, because there's some really cool businesses and organizations that have really cool plans as well. So, as you know, so yeah, it's just really all about Dayton.
You might have noticed that there is a generation of young people here in we'll just say the greater Dayton area, because I grew up in Xenia like you, but for people who aren't from Ohio, when they ask where I'm from, I just say Dayton.
Right.
To Ohioans, I always say Xenia. Ohioans know where that is.
Yeah.
People that are not from here, whatever. So you just say Dayton. So people in the greater Dayton area, I've noticed a lot of young folks want to get out as soon as they can because they think it's boring here.
I have noticed that. That's kind of one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to start it is, let people know, hey, there's actually a lot of cool stuff around here. But, I got a brother who kind of did the same thing, moved to Chicago after living in Dayton for a little while. And, obviously there's tons of stuff to do there, but there's really I feel like more than enough stuff to keep me busy, just around here. So, so that, and there's like I just went to a thing that the Collaboratory is doing last night called Dayton Homecoming, where they're really kind of trying to get like Dayton evangelists, I guess, to, tell the story of Dayton and people who've moved back here from, having moved away, that kind of thing. So I think I think a lot of people are deciding it's a good place to be.
I used to travel for my previous corporate job globally. And I have found, and this experience might not be the same for everyone, but I have found that the more places that I have seen, the more I realize that Dayton is a pretty good place to live.
I would totally agree with that. Yeah. I haven't traveled a ton, but, I've done some overseas trips and things. And I feel like it's just big enough that it's got all the things you really want. I got plenty of microbreweries to go to, that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's a good size, and then, small enough too that you don't like struggle to find a parking space everywhere. So that's also nice.
Not everywhere. Sometimes,
yeah, that's true.
Sometimes in the Oregon district.
That is true.
So something that I specifically learned from your podcast is you had a very enthusiastic episode about Stoney's Munchie. I just forgot the name of the place.
Stoney's Munchie Bar, yeah.
Stoney's Munchie Bar. I had never heard of the place, and I listened to this podcast episode, and here's what I learned. I already knew how much work it took to run a restaurant, like, intellectually, but to hear someone talk about it in detail, wow.
Yeah.
And especially the way that they had to build that location from a disaster into a place that people could go and eat.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's I think he spent like, what did he say? Like a year or something working on it, basically, just trying to get it up to code and to what they wanted it to look like. And I think he still felt rushed to open it, but obviously he wanted to get it open by 420. So, that was important too. But it's, it's definitely one of my, it's like my top two. I think it's probably definitely in Dayton, my favorite like biscuits and gravy place. They're really awesome. So
it's officially on my list. I haven't been yet, but were it not for the Discover Dayton podcast, I might never have known it existed.
Great.
So mission accomplished. Awesome. I discovered something in Dayton through your podcast.
Yes, that's awesome. I'm glad. Thank you.
And instead of talking about that episode further, see, what we do is we tell people, go listen to that episode of the Discovery Day.
There you go. Thank you.
And learn about Stoney's. Also, just briefly, you have an episode talking about the Dayton Triangles. For people that might not know, what was that?
So that was Dayton's football team, which happened to be so the very first, this was what was surprising to me, is that, and I knew this before I interviewed the guests I had on, but it was the first NFL game ever was actually played here in Dayton at Triangle Park between the Dayton Triangles and the Columbus Panhandles, and we shut them out. So Dayton won the very first ever NFL game, and there's a lot of, I assumed like that the name was just because the park is shaped like a triangle, but apparently that's not the reason why. So Bruce Smith, he explained the correct reason. So it's pretty interesting.
And instead of telling you that reason, we're going to send you to the Discover Dayton podcast so you can listen to it. So basically my point here is you cover a lot of ground. You've got one on the first NFL game. You've got a local restaurant. You've got a local woodworking business. You talk about not just Woodland Cemetery, but some very specific subset of people that are in Woodland Cemetery at the moment. You're covering a lot of diverse territory. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks. I don't want it to be just like one thing, because I think I'm interested in a lot of these different things, and I think a lot of other people are too. So, but I did do kind of before I launched it, there's a what's going on in Dayton Facebook group, and I, kind of put a poll in there, and I was just asking people what are you interested in hearing about, and I made it so people could add their own options, and people put a ton of different options, so I'm trying to do a smattering, I guess, and I also do like a weekly news roundup, just kind of where I read the news under 10 minutes and then I talk about some events that are coming up. So still trying to figure out, what all it's going to look like. And I will say my recording has improved a bit because I did not, at first, I wasn't using the greatest recording setup. So I think the recording setup I have now is a little bit better. So hopefully it's improving rather than, going the other way.
Well, I don't have the greatest recording setup either, but we make do with what we have, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to understand more about how you prep for one of these. And so I will use as the example an episode that I have not listened to yet, but I will. Because I know this person. You just talked to Libby recently about the bright side. You might have talked to her about more. I'm just reading the title from the podcast episode, and I haven't listened to it yet. So you know that you're going to talk to a person like Libby who has a few different interests and has her hands in a few different things in town and knows a lot of people. How do you decide what you're going to talk to her about?
Well, for that episode, there was a specific purpose, I guess. And I mean, the main purpose, I suppose, was talking to her about the bright side. But obviously I know, Libby's got a ton of history in the area. And, she was, the co-host of the Gem City podcast with Terry Martin, who I just heard, the episode you did with him recently, which was great. It helped me actually kind of get connected to him too. So thank you for that one. But I guess, people these days have a big digital footprint. So you can generally find a lot of things that people have done or projects they're involved in. And so I just kind of scour the internet and look for things I find interesting or things they told me, that they want to talk about, or, or things that I just definitely want to know more about, I guess. And I try to just keep it to, I generally set the questions, I think, at around 10 questions. So that kind of helps me both with time management, but also focus on the things I really want to focus on, I suppose. So, and generally that leaves it between, like 30 minutes to an hour tops, which I try to keep the episodes, not too long. So I guess that's kind of the way I prepare for it, I suppose. But what about you? How do you get ready for your episodes?
You don't want to save that to when I'm on. You know what? I'll answer that now because when I'm on your podcast, we'll probably just talk about music. So
sure.
So for me, it really depends on the guests. A lot of my guests have been people I personally know, and when that's the case, if it's someone I have a history with, it's more like a chat than an interview.
Sure.
Right. I try to make sure that what I like or love about the person, I try to frame the conversation such that comes out for the listeners. Sometimes I'm good at that. Sometimes I'm not.
Sure.
But for someone that I already have a relationship with, there's a reason, something drew us to be acquaintances or friends, or there's a reason we get along. And I would like to communicate those reasons to the audience, but I want to not talk so much. I would like the guest to do it. And that's something I've been working on. I found that I talk way too much in my podcast episodes, like this one right now. But you asked me the question. So
I don't think so.
So in editing, I actually have been cutting a lot of myself out of the conversations. If I feel like I'm not adding value to a part, some of my dialogue just disappears. And I want to focus. Yeah, I want to focus on what the guest has to say. For someone I don't know all that well, I've actually not had any complete strangers. There's been a couple people on that I only know through online interactions. But for someone I don't know very well, I might have 2 or 3 questions. I don't like it to feel like an interview. I like it to feel more like a chat. And I should probably have more questions or an outline just to keep it focused and not meandering. But yeah, I don't. Shame on me.
No, I don't think there's any wrong way to do it. That's what works for me. So,
For musicians, as far as the preparation I do for musicians, I try to listen to at least one of their full albums or what they've done recently.
Yeah.
Enough, like if it's a musician where I know them and I already know their entire catalog, like I had Todd Widener on earlier, and he's a gentleman from the Dayton music scene that I've known since I was like 19. And I've listened to everything he's ever done when he made music here, except for like maybe his first band that he doesn't talk about much anymore. So there wasn't really a lot of, I need to learn the catalog prep. This is somebody I've been a fan of for a long time, and now we're friends, and it's, and a lot of people in Dayton remember him fondly. So that was a pretty easy chat. I'm going to give you a peek into the future. There is a novelist on my list of people to talk to for the podcast soon.
Okay.
Different direction for me, because normally I talk to musicians, but I'll talk about anything as long as it's interesting. It's just I lean music. But so the novelist, like, I don't have writing, and I don't know how to write fiction. And so to do the prep for that, I'm going to have to read one of this person's novels to get a feel for how they write. And I'll check out their social media and their website. So, and I told the person, great, I'm going to have you on, but I want to make sure that I spend the time with your work first, that I don't sound stupid when I'm talking to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally get that. I was actually wondering, because I feel bad because I'm not the fastest reader, and I've got one or two authors that I want to talk to, and I'm like, I'm going to get to it, I promise, but I haven't set those dates up yet because I have not yet even, to be honest, started the book. But I went to the Dayton Poetry Slam this last weekend, and there was a poet there who was really great, and they have a self-published work that's on Amazon that I ordered, and it was only like 39 pages, and I was like super happy about that because I can get through that a little quicker. So, but yeah, I totally get what you mean.
How was that? I've only been once. I keep meaning to go do that again sometime.
It was really cool. Some really talented people, just all sorts of people there that, and it was really neat. I went with a former student that I'm actually friends with, and they were, they performed. Like, anybody can get up on stage, and perform as long as you put your name in. So, and then they had a feature act as well. So it was like open mic night, and then the feature, and then more open mic. So, and it was really good. And the person who did the feature, who was it? Letitia Ellis, I think is their name. And they were great. So, I'm definitely going to be going back in the future.
Let's talk about the getting a guest process. Something that I am not great at. And here's why I say that. My guests have been pretty much to this point people I know, right?
Right.
People are less likely to say, nope, won't do it. They might, but less likely. And again, I should preface that by saying there are people that I've not met face to face, but people I've had on who we have talked on Twitter or on social media or email, and that's just as valid a way to make a networking connection as face to face, right?
Sure.
I do have. There's been a couple of people I don't know that I've reached out to and have not gotten responses, and I have a list of people that I'd love to get, and I'm sure you might have one too. Man, these are people I'd love to talk to. What is your approach for talking to someone that you do not personally know and getting them on your podcast? And I'm going to try to learn something from you here.
Well, I will say I definitely get a lot of non-responses, so you're not alone. But I have, I've tried a few different strategies, I guess. I've definitely, a lot of the people I've had on are people I know, or people that, like you said, that I've met through online or whatever. But, I'm also trying to network wherever I go for the podcast. So I bought, business cards. Like, you can get 1,000 for like $15, and it makes you look a little bit more legit. And so I just kind of, go to events sometimes, and I talk with folks. And I went to Front Street Artists Colony, for their first Fridays last weekend. My wife's an artist, so she really likes to go to those. And I wanted to start talking to some local artists as well. And so, that was one way. I think meeting people in person and giving them a business card and then saying you're going to contact them, or even getting a business card back from them and, reaching out to them that way. I found that to be pretty successful, because then they know you're a real person, and so that's helped me, I guess, get in touch with some people. But, like I went to that Dayton homecoming thing put on by the collaboratory last night, and I definitely believe in it. I think it's a great idea. Want to support it, but I also definitely have my business cards with me, and met some people that I invited on the show there as well. So I guess just looking at it as all these visits as networking opportunities. So that's kind of how I approach it.
How long did it take you from the time you decided you wanted to do a podcast till the time your first episode was up?
Well, so this is actually my second podcast, at least, depending on how you count it, maybe third or fourth even. But the other, like, at least two of those are like defunct, and one I just kind of do as a hobby at this point. I'm trying to do this one, Discover Dayton, more seriously, but I really kind of got into it a lot more during the pandemic, because I was working for the city at the time, and they put us all on temporary leave. And so I had just a bunch of time on my hands and nothing to do. And so I was like, well, I've liked doing podcasting in the past. Maybe I'll do something like that. So I just, started. I got actually, I think I had a microphone already. And so I just kind of started, recording interviews. And before you knew it, I had I think 80 episodes for that podcast, which was called Killing Time. And that's the one I'm still doing. I've got 2 recorded interviews I haven't even edited yet because it's just not my priority at the moment. But my wife is the one actually that had the idea about the Discover Dayton podcast. And she had that idea one night. And by the next day, I was researching it and trying to figure out the best way to host it and everything. And because I'd never used a professional hosting service. I'd always kind of jerry-rigged my podcast, I guess, to where I would upload it to archive.org, and then I would have a Blogger, account where I would put the link in, embed it there, and then use FeedBurner to send it to the the different podcasting services, which is great because it's free, but you don't really get to see many statistics or anything. And I really wanted to be able to analyze it from that end. So I used Podbean for this new one. And it's been working out pretty well. So, but yeah, that's it, I guess.
Tell me about Podbean. I use Anchor.
Okay.
Because it's free.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, tell me about Podbean.
I like it so far. I'm a little worried. And I'm guessing you're probably in some Facebook groups too about podcasting. I don't know, but
no, not yet.
Oh no. Okay. Yeah. I'm in this. There's a good one that I'll have to share with you because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I worry a little bit because I've not had any problems with it, but I've seen other people say that they've done things like start putting ads on your content without your permission and without you getting any of the money. And, I've heard a couple kind of somewhat horror stories, but for the most part, people seem to be pretty happy with it. And I like it because I was looking at trying to get a website for the podcast and then try to figure out how to, put the podcast on that website, but they create a website for you. And, they're not it's not like Wix where there's a ton of templates or anything. It's pretty, standard. But it's also kind of nice because then you don't really spend a ton of time on the website. And I also like too that it lets you easily sign up for a lot of these different hosting services. So they make it a much more simplified process, I guess, to get it onto Apple or Spotify or whatever. So I like it for those reasons. And like I said, the statistics, are super helpful. So I'd never had that before. So I like it so far, and I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't had any problems yet. So, but I'm curious about.
Free to you?
It's not. It's a little under $100 a year, so it's not terrible. No, but Anchor's free.
It is, and I will tell you about Anchor. And in case people who want a podcast are listening, this is perhaps useful information because we have some first-person experience with these services. So up front, I knew I didn't want to spend money on the podcast hosting, and here's why. I'm a musician. The podcast just happens to be something else I'm doing. I didn't know if I was going to be good at it. I didn't know how long I was going to be able to do it. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get enough guests. And I'm already paying enough music-related admin fee stuff for various stuff that musicians do or could do, right? And I didn't want another one. And so I thought, well, this podcast, there's probably not a way to monetize it up front, so I don't want to spend any money. And if I find a way to monetize it, then maybe, I'll think about things like upgrading my equipment, buying stuff that I could do with mobile, right? But there's no point in doing that. I don't want to actually invest at this point. And I was looking for a free service that was easy to use, but didn't feel cheap.
Yeah.
And Anchor fit the bill. Now, the one caveat is Anchor was purchased by a certain very large streaming service based out of Sweden with a green logo a few years ago.
Okay.
And that particular streaming service has been in the crosshairs of controversy for the way they don't pay musicians. By the way, none of them really pay musicians that well. But setting that aside, and also for some of the content that they have from podcasters who they're handing a whole bunch of money to, right? So they've been in the news recently. I'm not a particularly big fan of that service that owns Anchor. But I can set my feelings about them aside because Anchor is free, and I'll just deal with it for now. As far as the distribution is concerned, it goes to that particular service first and automatically. Obviously, they're going to set it up that way. Once they made the Anchor purchase, that's how they set it up.
Right.
You can distribute elsewhere. There's a bunch of hoops to jump through. I mean, they give you your RSS link, but especially getting it over to the iPlatform, I am not an iUser for anything, so for me that was a pain to set up, and I got it done, but there's a whole lot of individual effort required to get your podcasts everywhere.
I have noticed that Apple is always the most difficult one, and for me it's always the logo. They won't like whatever I do, like I think I've created the logo into the right dimensions and pixels or whatever they require, but inevitably I upload it and then they reject it because the logo's not right. So it's frustrating. But so yeah, I've had similar frustrations with Apple, I guess.
Anchor does allow for ads. I haven't jumped into that world yet. I probably will, just to give it a try.
Yeah.
I think, like most services, how much you make from an ad is going to depend on how many listeners you have. And I don't think I have enough listeners to make it worth annoying them by having them listen to an ad yet.
Sure. No, I feel the same way. I totally understand.
Maybe if I had 100,000, 200,000 listeners, it'd be worth it to get the few cents and then, whatever. But I think when you're starting out, at least for me, since again, I don't consider it, well, I did put it on my business card, but I don't really consider it a job yet. Maybe I should look at it that way. What do you think?
I mean, I'm definitely trying to look at it that way. And I don't know. I'm trying to take this a lot more seriously, and be more consistent with my episodes when I'm putting them out and things like that. So I would say, I'm kind of looking at it as a job, I suppose.
That's how I look at music. And this started basically as another promotion way in music. When you're an indie musician, Arch, it's the making music part is fun. But if you don't learn how to do marketing and promotion, no one ever hears your music. So that's part of the job.
Right.
And for me, podcasting was going to go into that marketing and promotion bucket. Turns out that I happen to actually like talking to people.
Yeah,
so I enjoy it. But it started out being as another content generator that eventually I want to point people to my music. That doesn't mean we're going to talk about that all the time.
Sure.
Maybe I should look at it as more of a job. It would probably help focus the way I approach it a little bit better.
No, yeah. I mean, I've never really had a podcast before that I was like kind of started with the goal of hoping to monetize it at some point. And I I don't know. I just kind of want to see if I can, you know. So I'm kind of trying to focus on it a bit so that I can, see where that takes it. But yeah, and that was another reason why I chose Podbean, is I knew that I really needed to have statistics if I was going to ever try to monetize it, so that I could. And I don't even know yet what route I guess would be the best, whether it's like a sponsorship thing or Patreon or you know a number of other things. I'm not sure what will be the best way, but right now I guess I'm just focusing on trying to make sure the episodes are interesting and the audio sounds okay and all that kind of stuff before I worry about any of that. So I'm a ways off, I think.
Create something engaging, build the audience, then worry about trying to get paid for all the time it takes.
Right, exactly.
And really, the people listening, don't get the idea that either of us think that this is going to lead to a multi-gazillion-dollar contract like certain people get for doing podcasting.
Oh, no.
That's not like where we're coming from. Just know that the conversation part's enjoyable, but the editing part's really not. And it takes a lot of time. And that's that's work. If you could afford it, like, I don't know about you, but if I could afford it, I would hire someone to do the editing.
I would definitely strongly consider that. Yeah. It's not my favorite thing. I do like it because I don't usually like, that is kind of the only time I typically listen to the whole episode is when I'm editing. So I'm not good at that, and I probably should be. I think that I probably do need to start doing that, because that's really what made me try to find a new audio solution, was listening to it and realizing it wasn't really working. Like, I'm kind of embarrassed by quite a few of the, like, maybe the first 10 episodes that are, where I have a guest, because the audio is just really not great. And so listening to it kind of helped me realize that, and, that I needed to find a new solution. Because I do all these, remote. And so I looked into a lot of different remote recording, platforms, and they were all either super expensive or glitchy or both. And so I settled on Zoom, and it's been working pretty well. But yeah, what I was doing before wasn't working, and I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't started listening to them more. So I think that it probably is good advice that I should take myself, is to listen to your episodes more. But
hey, so Arch, what did your childhood smell like?
I was just thinking about the other day, because I was listening to your interview with Terry. What did it smell like? I should have thought about it more, because I never really came up with a good answer. I don't know. There's a lot of smells I remember, like, my uncle, whenever we would go to his house, he always smoked a pipe, which, I love the smell of pipes, which now I smoke pipes because I like it a lot. So, I guess that sticks out. I should tell you too, I have a terrible memory, so I I could sit here all day and struggle to remember things. But my mom was always my mom still is a very good cook, and she liked cooking a lot. So we'd usually have some some good smells coming from the kitchen, and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a fascinating question that I really need a better answer to. So that's probably the best I can do.
That's pretty good. I always feel bad because I stole that from the Gem City podcasts. But as you know, Terry's like, well, I stole that from somebody else, so it's totally okay.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
I just know that I can't ask anyone that's been on the Gem City podcast, because Terry would ask all of his music guests that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I only use it for people that I know haven't been on that one.
Yeah.
I really got to come up with my own question that's kind of a shtick that works for everybody. I haven't been able to think of anything that's that good.
Yeah, no, that is a good one. Yeah, I don't know what the comparable one would be. That's hard. But somebody's probably come up with one out there. You can you can steal it too, you know.
Well, let's brainstorm a little bit. If you're going to ask a question that you want to ask everyone, it has to be something universal, which is difficult because of everybody's cultural backgrounds are completely different. I mean, look at us. We grew up in the same town, but we have different cultural backgrounds. So there's going to be some experiences that you have that I don't, and vice versa, right? I feel like that particular question is culturally neutral.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, for sure.
Everybody's been a child.
Yep.
Regardless of whether that was a positive or negative experience, because it could be either, right? We live there's plenty of people that had really awful childhood experiences.
Right.
But everyone's been a child, and smells are tied very strongly to the memory center in your brain.
Yeah.
So I like, wow, like it transcends culture and language, and that's the kind of question that I would like to come up with to ask. Only, yeah, I have no idea where to start.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm not. I'm not good at questions like that. I'm better at researching things and trying to ask thoughtful questions based on people's unique histories rather than coming up with like a one that would work well for everybody. I think that's much harder to do. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know.
I mean, you could ask about someone's first love, but there's going to be people that don't want to talk about that. Right? Like the childhood smell question is just as universal as a first love, but it's not something that someone's probably going to be like, no, I won't talk about that.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. But I cannot think of a better one at the moment. I think I would need some time. I'm sorry.
Nah, I mean, I can't either, which is why I stole it for some guests from Terry.
No, I think that's a good idea.
I'm only a little bit ashamed of it. Are there any podcasts that you look forward to every week? What do you listen to on a regular basis these days? If you listen to any on a regular basis.
I'm kind of I don't know. I used to listen to more, but I haven't listened to as many lately. But probably the one I've listened to most consistently over the years. I'm a little bit of a political junkie, I guess, and I teach political science at Sinclair, so I really like 538, their podcast.
They're very data driven.
They are, and I like that about it. Their podcasts, they're still data driven, but then they put their take on it, and they're really plugged in. So you're listening to a bunch of smart people who know a lot of the data and know a lot of the minutia of what's going on, not only like in Congress, but also like in state houses around the country and things. So I like them a lot. So that's probably the one I've listened to most consistently. I was curious about, I just gave, what's it called? I don't know, but John Kasich and Jordan Klepper, I don't know if you've seen them, but they have a podcast together. And
by John Kasich, you mean the former governor of our state?
I do, that one and the same, yeah. And I listened to it almost just like as a curiosity at first, but it's not bad. It's probably not my favorite, but I was kind of just checking that out a little bit not too long ago. So, but there's so many podcasts that it's almost overwhelming sometimes once you start to get into it, and so I'm not a very good consistent listener probably of any podcast really, but I do love listening to lots of different ones, and especially certain episodes and things.
Is there anything that you would like to promote other than the Discover Dayton podcast? And your other one's called Killing Time, right? And I'm going to link to that in the show notes.
It is, yeah. Not really at the moment. Kind of in a spot where I'm not really there's nothing I'm really trying to promote other than that right now. I used to be like a community outreach director for a school, and so I would always, try to plug the school and stuff like that. But I don't have to do any of that anymore, which is nice. So yeah, just probably the Discover Dayton podcast, and hope people check it out. And it's pretty much available wherever you can get your podcasts. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to talking with you on that show.
It's my pleasure. And again, folks, if you're in the Dayton area, I mean, if you're not, you can totally listen to the Discover Dayton podcast as well. But if you are from the Dayton area, if you currently live here or you used to live here and this used to be home for you, go listen to this podcast. You will definitely come to appreciate more things about the Gem City, and it'll help you, as the title says, discover Dayton.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
it. Thanks, Arch.
Yeah, thank you.
Once again, thanks to Arch Grieve for agreeing to this podcast exchange. Go listen to the episode of Discover Dayton that came out on Wednesday, April 20th. You'll hear me talking to Arch on his podcast, and of course, he was kind enough to guest on my podcast. Also, dear listener, thank you for being here on the You Could Be My Aramis podcast. Why not give me a like or subscribe or review wherever you listen to podcasts? Have a lovely weekend.